High above the Capitol steps in Albany, New York, is the office of the Governor of New York State. I'm Stephen Rosenbaum, the executive producer of Broadcast New York. And there are two major party candidates this fall. One is Mario Cuomo, two-term incumbent. The challenger, Pierre Rinfret, the Republican candidate. We wondered who these men were and thought you'd like to meet them.
Why would anyone want to take on the weight of the shoulders of New York State with the problems that are ahead? It seems like a daunting task.
Well, Cuomo is a very dour, negative human being by nature. All he does is cry and complain. He cries about everything. He complains about everything. The state is, he's the result, he's the reason that the problems exist.
What do you want me to say except that I'm amused at his approach? I don't know the man, and I don't know what he intends to achieve, but he apparently is from the old school of, shout a lot, hit the bar with your fist, and people will think you're strong. He'll get my attention when he says something intelligent and reasonable, and so far he's not gotten my attention.
If you ask the people, are you on the right track? Is the state on the right track or wrong track? 56% of the people who stay in New York say we're on the wrong track. That's devastating for Cuomo.
If you're in politics, the instinct always is take the problem. If it breaks down into two choices, what appear to be competitive choices, pick the one that 51% of the people agree with and go. For example, the struggle between environment and economy. If I come out on the economy side, then I get all the business guys. They can give me money for the campaign, that's 51%. I go with the economy, take down the trees. Or I'm an ecologist, environmentalist. There's 51% of the vote there, the heck with the businessmen. So we'll do no business here, everything, let trees grow in Fifth Avenue. It's ridiculous. The truth is, the real political challenge is, how do you make both truths live in the same world at the same time?
You got off to a rough sledding at the beginning.
Yeah.
Tweaked the nose of the New York Times and a couple other people. How important will the media be in this election? I mean, will they make it a race if they care to make it a race?
No, I think the media are fabulous. I really do. The media does its job. Media has the right to question anything, probe anything, do anything it wants. It makes lots of mistakes. It's as human as anybody else. I don't resent it. I have no problem with the media. I don't think, however, very honestly, the media determine how the people are going to vote. I think the people make their own determination.
But Mario Cuomo is less complimentary about the media, more specifically television and its role in the electoral process.
Television, awesome in its influence, for good and for not so good. That makes a huge difference in trying to govern people. It has helped develop a society, not just of instant gratification, but of presumed instant understanding of issues. Because they see a picture and see a politician for 5 seconds, they think they understand the issue.
New York has the wonderful opportunity to be one of the leaders in the nation, the leader in the nation on a lot of issues, but also has the unfortunate problems of being the leader in AIDS, both in its expertise and some say in a number of cases, depending on whose numbers you read. What is New York State going to do in the 4 years ahead with you as governor?
No state in the Union has an anti-AIDS effort like ours. No state in the Union. California, obviously, is the largest state in the Union. It does not spend as much as we do per capita. Does not spend as much as we do total. We're doing everything you can do, and everything you can imagine doing for AIDS, but not enough of it. And we need to do more.
Well, AIDS is obviously a national scourge, and that's what it is. It's a national scourge. Go back in the history of this country. We've had national scourges before. One that you wouldn't know because you're too young, and I'm not being sarcastic, a little thing called infantile paralysis. All right? Infantile paralysis is a horrible disease. I had partial infantile paralysis, nothing serious. I got a mild case, enough of a case that it cured itself. The country voluntarily put money together into this national scourge until it was licked. AIDS is the same thing. It's a national scourge.
And what does Pierre Rinfret have to say about the ever-present question of a Cuomo presidential run?
Maybe he's talking on the national issues because he's really running for president. He won't admit that either. So it's total confusion on his part, intentional, because he doesn't dare say, let's talk about the state. If he does that, he's in deep, deep trouble. And so therefore he didn't talk about it.
Why it's in the public mind, it's not Mario Cuomo. I am not that strong or attractive. It is the idea this guy is the governor of the state of New York, and they are naturally people who should be thinking about the presidency, because we're Americans, and Americans always want to go upward. As a matter of fact, that's especially true in New York State, where your whole motto is Excelsior. See, they think there's something wrong with you if, as vice president of the corporation, you say, but I don't want to be president. I think this is just right for me. They think that there must be some other reason that your answer is not a truthful one because it's unnatural. And what they do then is they try to think up why. Why, if this guy is good in the polls, he says he doesn't want to run, he must have cancer of the colon, or something in the closet, or, his son has a problem. Then they play all these stupid, evil games, trying to figure out what evil reason there is for you not running. I have no plans to run, and I don't feel bad about it.
People do change. 8 years in office, coming up on another 4 that you're running for. How have you changed?
There's only one Mario Cuomo. There's presumably only one Steve Rosenbaum. You see them in different moods and dispositions at different times, but that's not what's important here. They're not talking about Mario Cuomo. They're talking about the condition of the state. The state has done a whole lot of wonderful things in the last 8 years that I happen to be governor. Not just because I was the governor. I get credit for them because I was the governor. I get blamed for the things that went wrong because I was the governor. But neither are true.
Two very different men with very different ideas about how New York State should be run and how the 4 years ahead should be mapped. Pierre Rinfret and Mario Cuomo. And in the weeks ahead, the decision will be yours. For Broadcast New York, I'm Stephen Rosenbaum.
It's down to the final hours of Campaign 90, the race for governor. And while polls show Mario Cuomo as most likely to retain his job for another 4 years, he's facing a critical electorate. And he says his toughest opponent ever, his own record.
Whatever else we lead the nation in, the state of New York does not, by any fair measure, lead the nation in state-level taxes or spending.
A day on the campaign trail. First stop, a conference on fiscal reform at New York University. And Cuomo's talking numbers.
I said, tax reform sounds to me like a joke. We did not raise the sales tax. Forget about democratic politics. It destroys states like New York.
Steve Rosenbaum and Paul Gallagher from our town are following us.
What happens next?
Back to the Trade Center for a little while, then off to the PBA endorsement at 3 o'clock.
For all the candidates, it's a grueling ordeal of appearances, handshaking, and the endless whir of press cameras. He may be off the podium, but he's always working the crowd.
Cerca de San Juan.
San Juan.
Sí, después de Bayamón, de San Juan, Bayamón.
I played ball in San Juan. The coach was from Pepe Seda, the
Sí.
manager of the San Juan baseball team. What is
William King from Colombia.
He's a national figure of considerable significance in politics. He's the, right now, early first choice, I think, of the Democratic Party to be the presidential contender in 1992. He's correctly recognized as perhaps the finest political speaker in the United States today. He's a formidable political force. He's listened to nationally. Fred Dicker, New York Post.
Political pundits and Cuomo watchers are keeping a close eye on the 1990 vote.
That's me.
New York Post columnist Fred Dicker says there's more at stake for Cuomo than a third term as governor. In fact, Dicker says he's got a lot to lose.
I think there's a good likelihood that he will win and lose, that he will not get the 60+% votes that he got in 1986, that the Republicans will keep control of the Senate, that the bond issue will go down, and Ned Reagan will be reelected. I think all of those, except his own victory, are close. But the polls I've been seeing and speaking to politicians on both sides of the aisle lead me to believe that right now, unless something dramatic occurs, the governor is not posed to score a sweeping victory by any means.
Yet, if not Cuomo, who? Some say this man, a candidate who has made headlines this election year by pointing fingers and taking aim at Cuomo's record.
California treats 2 Medicaid patients for the price of 1 in New York, and treat 2 drug addict patients for the price of 1 in New York. California got 75% more people than we do. So my answer is there's a ton of money in that budget. We could hold that budget with no increases in spending for the next 4 years and pay for most of everything we want. However, limit some of the crazy increases we've been seeing. And very frankly, I'll put it to you bluntly, and I'm totally prejudiced, I think the state desperately needs an economist. Because, boy, the guy we got is the ultimate turkey. He couldn't pass Economics 1. I thank you very much.
Outside police headquarters, the audience is cops, and Cuomo is talking crime.
We have more than doubled the amount of resources we put into criminal justice. That's not easy to do. You know how discouraging it is to these people to make arrests and see a man's sheet that has 15, 16 arrests on it, and nothing ever happens? How do you ask him to go back when his family is at home wondering whether he'll ever make it home?
From the outside, what follows might look like an autograph session at a major league ball game. But instead, it's the governor shaking hands and fielding questions from reporters.
How old are you?
I'm 28.
You're
I
a
work for the New
voter.
York City Police Department. How you doing?
What do you do with the police department?
Please answer. Excuse me. Could you please answer the question?
I've answered it 50 times. Where have you been?
What you gonna support
The
this
answer
one?
is yes. I've
Including the
answered it over
residency
and over.
requirement?
I just did it on Sunday.
Including the
I've
residency
recommended the
requirement?
residency requirement long before the mayor did. I'm running against myself. That's even harder.
Cuomo's not running against Cuomo. Cuomo is running against Rinfret, not a second-rate, not a third-rate, but apparently a fourth-rate candidate.
They say to me, Mario, you said you want to take care of the children. Yes, I gave you $1.3 billion, but there's still sick children. And they're right. They say, Mario, you said you were for education. Yeah, I gave you 92% more money. It's the all-time record. Yeah, but we still need more. You're right. I can't win when I run against myself.
We're running against history. We're running against other campaigns. And in the public's mind, that makes it harder to judge.
Billy Cunningham has been running Cuomo's Victory 90 effort from Albany. He's managing a tricky non-campaign. He says running hard makes Cuomo look vulnerable, which he is not. But not campaigning will certainly lose votes.
We're running against the last election returns. We're running against a person that nobody knows, and so everybody thinks you're going to have this big election victory.
We are the only alternative to disaster. We are the alternative to a phony philosopher who wants more spending, more taxes, and drive more people out of this state.
If we don't work hard, if we don't run hard and try and get our voters out, then we're at fault if the numbers don't come true.
Back on the campaign trail, 5:45 p.m., Tavern on the Green in Central Park. The audience, a $500 a plate Environmental Bond Act fundraiser.
I'll pick up 3 other ways. Huh?
Have you lost a little weight?
No, I'm buying larger shirts. Does it work?
Because I know I saw you in an ad the other night. And I said,
Reagan used to do that. You buy a larger shirt, it always works. People start throwing money at you after a while. Who's here that has money we can get?
The audience is New York's power elite, and Cuomo talks deals.
Where's Brooke? Where's Tony? Put up your hand. Tony, let's make it quick. Let's do bottom line. Let's talk topless. What do you want from the bond issue?
We want the Bond Act to pass.
And then what?
We want support
For what?
a great waterfront park.
You got it.
The
What
rest
else?
of Brooklyn.
He's focusing on the Environmental Bond Act, on planting trees and talking about the environment and Social Security. What he's doing is evading the real issues, paying no attention to those issues whatsoever, and he's running off hiding about the issues. The issues are taxes, and the issues are crime, and the death penalty, and excessive state spending. He won't talk about it.
Most voters in New York, in our most recent polls, have identified that they feel that New York is not necessarily going in the right direction. But that doesn't mean that Cuomo, that problems are being laid at Cuomo's doorstep.
At the headquarters of the Marist poll in Poughkeepsie, Lee Miringoff keeps close tabs on the governor's approval ratings.
And I think even this year, when the economic bowling ball has rolled through the Northeast, Cuomo's the only pin standing. And many governors have either had electoral troubles in the re-election campaigns or in the Northeast have opted not to run. And then you have Mario Cuomo standing out there in very good shape as he seeks his third term.
Campaign trail, 8 p.m. the helipad at West 30th. Rinfret stays in New York City, while Cuomo heads home, a 45-minute flight up the Hudson. He leaves behind the press, podiums, and critics, but Cuomo says his toughest opponent stays right by his side.
If I'm a viewer in upstate New York, if I'm in Rochester, if I'm in Plattsburgh, if I'm in Buffalo, and I see this budget hassle going on, I say, you know, they're calling it a crisis this year, but wasn't it a crisis last year? And maybe this is just Albany going through its standard budget wrangle. What do you say to that? Isn't that what it looks like to them?
I am trying to take care of them in a way they don't recognize, by making sure they have jobs, by making sure their kids that we're trying to educate will have jobs. To do that, I have to avoid bankrupting the state or imposing taxes so heavy on business people and on working middle-class people that we don't drive them out of this state. That's what I'm trying to avoid.
Now, there's no question about the fact that you've been taking this whole budget thing on the chin. Is that fair? Are you?
I'm not happy about taking it on the chin. I'd rather be.
Are. I mean, it's been a tough couple of weeks.
Oh, sure, I'm getting killed in the polls, etc. I don't like that. I mean, anybody, any politician or human being who tells you he likes going home and saying to his family, I'm sorry, sweetheart, I'm sorry, pal, you can't have the car I promised you as a graduation present, but I got docked, we're short, we can't have the Hanukkah we wanted, we can't have the Christmas we wanted. Anybody who tells you they enjoy their kids saying, well, you failed us, Dad, we were counting on it, you know, is lying to you.
We have an 800 number, and all across the state we get phone calls, and the phone calls say, you know, we're angry at this, Mario, we're angry at that, Mario. It seems like people are angry at Mario Cuomo.
What you're hearing is not that they're being cheated.
Nope.
What you're hearing is we're not getting what we want.
Mario.
Yeah.
And see, but they always put the comma Mario at the end of that.
Let me, Steve, what name would they put instead of Mario? Go to Washington. You know what's going to happen after the Persian Gulf War really subsides?
George.
And the economy is really bad, 1992, you get to a presidential election. You think they're going to say, call you up and say, hey, Steve, that George Mitchell is really screwing it up. Hey, Steve, that Foley, that guy Tom Foley. You call those people up and say, who's Foley and Mitchell? They're going to call you up and say, gee, Bush won the war, but what about the recession?
Certainly New York State is disappointed in Mario Cuomo today, frustrated. Are you disappointed in New York State for not giving you a little bit more faith and standing behind you in these difficult times?
Why should I be disappointed in them? Who is different? I, you, aren't you like that? Aren't I like that? You have a wonderful relationship with your wife or your spouse or someone else. One little thing goes wrong, you blow your top. You forget all the wonderful things that happened, all the good things. All of a sudden, this little moment of irritation in your life becomes your whole life. That's called concupiscence. Ever since Adam and Eve conspired to nibble at the apple, we have not only had to wear clothes, we've also had to live with our imperfection. And that's what we all are. We're all like that. So I should look down on people who are like me? We're all, the human condition teaches us, if you don't get what you want, scream like heck. And they're screaming very loudly.
Let's talk about the election that we just survived, came through. A lot of pundits say it was a throw the bums out election.
It was indeed.
What happens to Democrats who vote Democratic and Republicans that vote Republican? Now all of a sudden I'm saying I just want whoever's in out.
Oh, I don't, you see, a lot of the distinctions that...
Thornburg being, you know...
A lot of the distinctions that politicians have taken for granted as being religious in significance, I have always kind of disdained. In 1985, I gave a speech at Yale University in which I wrote a line that's gotten used a lot, frankly, since then, the difference between the poetry of campaigns and the prose of governance. I said all this garbage about liberal, conservative. You give speeches that way. You don't govern that way. You don't write bills that way or budgets that way. That's not real. They threw out the Republican conservative mayor of Bridgeport, Connecticut, because she's heading a bankrupt city. Out with you. We don't care what kind of manager you are. You lost 13 games in a row. Don't tell us the shortstop dropped pop flies. You're the manager, you're out. We're tired of hearing about Darryl Strawberry's pulled muscle. You're in charge of the team, you're supposed to win, you didn't, you go.
You said a while ago that anything that George Bush does basically shows that is an emblem of error. It confesses error. Why won't he put more money into unemployment benefits, pump up the economy?
It confesses error. He believes you shouldn't give money to poor people who are in trouble. You should give it to the rich people so they invest. That's his whole philosophy. And it worked because the poor people and the middle class people didn't realize they were getting stiffed, frankly. Now they know. See, it never made it to their plate before. They were never in danger of losing their work. Now they finally looked up and said, oh my God, this Republican Kevin Phillips is right. They took all the money, they gave it to the rich people, and the middle class schleps are getting killed.
So for you, the unemployment extension is a black and white issue?
Of course it is, always has been.
Okay.
If you can't in this country, whereas I've said 1,000,000 times, I can take you by the hand from this place right here, Steve. In 10 minutes, I'll show you houses with Jaguars and Porsches side by side. If you're capable of that kind of success in a free enterprise system, but you have to turn and say to 6 million people who are out of work, we're sorry, we can't give you money for bread, you have to go beg to welfare, you have to give up all your dignity, you've worked 20 years, 30 years, you've supported a family, you're a hard-working, good citizen, you served in the armed forces, but we're not strong enough to relieve you of this indignity. You're begging for work, but we cannot take care of your family until we strengthen the economy enough to give you another job. If you can't do that, there's something powerfully wrong with the country, especially since you're able to raise the senators' salaries, you're able to pay basketball players $3 million. I mean, you'd have to be mad to look at that situation and say, oh, that's all right, that's the way it is in a democracy. That's ridiculous.
Does the potential change in the New York budget and the extension that's being discussed make it easier for you to look at a national issue and doesn't affect you?
No, the present problem of getting people together is making it much tougher.
How do you feel about that proposal? Are you supporting it? Are you exploring it?
I'm not only exploring it, I think it is the boldest of all the approaches. You see, people have it wrong. The press got it wrong. It's not unusual. I didn't talk to them about it. We never had a press conference. They never asked any questions. They got leaks. They were eager to get to the front page of the New York Times, and they did. And they gave people the impression that the plan was designed to duck an obligation and make it easier by spreading it over a period of time. The plan was designed to charge forward and seize a problem before its time. We are accelerating the meeting of the obligation, not deferring it.
So does that mean we'll see more substantial cuts in services in
there are going to be a lot more cuts, because there are going to be no tax increases to the extent that I can avoid it. And if you don't do tax increases, you have to do cuts. Now, will people scream? Yes, sir. Will my polls go down again? I'm afraid so. If what you want is a perfect world, if you want no more tax increases, then I'm with you. And you have a huge deficit, and you expect that can go away without cutting education, cutting social services, cutting prisons, that's not going to happen. You have union leaders now for the public employees out in Detroit, where the AFL-CIO is having a convention, and all the candidates are appealing to them for support. And one of the public employee union leaders said, anyone but Cuomo. Somebody says, why? He says, well, because he won't give our guys raises. Well, if what it takes to get your votes is to give you money when we can't afford to give unemployment benefits, when we can't afford to feed some people in this society, then I'm afraid I'm going to lose a lot of votes.
No, that's not a new trend, though. I mean, votes have been bought since the beginning of time in one way or another.
When you give them money, you are their favorite.
Yes, sir.
When you don't, you become Satan.
Last question. You were quoted recently as saying that you wish you were Paul on the road to Damascus, and I find that...
No, Saul. If he was Saul before he was Paul. I don't want to get involved with Old and New Testaments here, Steve. But, let's take...
Which was the quote, though, Paul or Saul?
Well, it was in the Christian version of the story, it was Saul who was suddenly struck by inspiration in the form of lightning, striking him where he met his saddle, except he didn't have a saddle. And this inspiration instructed him that he should go from Saul to Paul, and that he had a new role in life.
So is this meant to have New Yorkers believe that you're standing by trees in rainstorms?
No. This was, I thought, a nice, facetious reference, saying to an impatient reporter who was saying, make up your mind, make up your mind, make up your mind. Saying to him, wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to deal with these complicated questions, if it could be done for you with a great burst of lightning. I said, regrettably, I'm no saint.
As the national campaign breaks, it seems to me it's going to be as simple as the GOP saying to the country, New York is a disaster. You know, we present Mario Cuomo. Will it be as simple as that?
If you allowed me to debate President George Bush right now on New York State, which you can announce to them, you can call the White House and say, the governor says if ever he should be a candidate and you think New York is an issue, he makes you an offer. He will listen to your best complaints about his great state for as long as you'd like to utter them, and he wants a chance to respond with the whole world listening. That's me to President Bush.
But at the point a national campaign breaks, those issues, I think, become kind of moot, and it becomes Mario Cuomo, steward of the ship. You were the guy that was at bat when the problems broke.
That's a joke. That's an absolute joke. Why? Because that's not the question. The question is President George Bush and the nation, not Washington, not Seattle, not Utah, not New York. I'd be pleased to talk about New York, but the question here is, what are you going to do about 16 million people out of work? What are you going to do about 23 million illiterates? What are you going to do about Japan and Germany beating our brains out? What are you going to do about the drugs? You declared war on drugs. What are you going to do about education? What are you going to do about health care? To allow the Republicans, and that's what you're doing, you're slipping into their scheme to allow them to distract people from that by making Willie Horton or Mario Cuomo or New York the issue. That's a joke.
But if you say that, if you say this isn't about New York, this is about George Bush and Mario Cuomo, then why wait until the budget is resolved? Why paint yourself into that corner?
I didn't paint myself into a corner. I took an oath. I ran for governor in 1990, and I put my hand up and I swore that I would do everything I could for this state. I didn't have to run again in 1990. I could have said, I'm not running. I want to be free to run for president. And this way I won't have to worry about your budget concerns. So at the moral level, if you will, I have to certainly discharge adequately my responsibility. And doing the budget is the biggest problem we face, the biggest we've faced in many years. Number two, practically, if I don't get this budget done, New York State and New York City will be devastated. The raiders will punish us. We will have trouble borrowing. We will be in unique difficulty. That would practically be an albatross too heavy to carry in any national political campaign.
Would you debate the president on the state of New York as it's compared to the state of the nation?
If New York were the issue, and you want it to be the issue, let's start the campaign this way. President Bush, you get in Steve's chair, I'll stay here. Let's talk about it until people are tired of it, and I will show you that your criticisms about New York will underscore your failures as president. And I'd be delighted to do that in any period of time they'd give me.
$4.5 billion in cuts. That's what we have to make in the New York State budget to reconcile the budget. What will New York be like after those cuts are made?
After all the cuts we make, we'll still be a cut above everybody else. I honestly believe that the possibility of my running for president is having no effect on the budget discussions. From the Republicans, I don't know if they'd want me to or not. From all appearances, Washington doesn't want me to run. The very idea that they keep screaming how easy I would be to beat indicates they don't want me to run. Because if they really believe that, they would be quiet, saying, let him run. Why should we discourage him? This guy's easy. They're not doing that. So I suspect that the Washington Republicans, rightly or wrongly, would prefer I didn't run.
If you run, will you win?
Yes.
States don't get to run the kind of deficits that the federal government does.
That's right.
I mean, if you could keep bouncing checks in the way the federal government has, you certainly could run a whole lot more programs.
That's exactly right.
And I think, in a sense, that's the thing that people can hold up and say, that makes sense to me. If New York could just borrow a lot of money and solve all its problems and clean all its streets, then why can't the federal government do that? We're borrowing the money. We obviously owe it to somebody.
Steve, you put your finger on something really good. There is a logic that works, I think. Drugs is a very good example. The president said, I declare war on drugs because it's a national concern. Just the way he declared war on Iraq. With Iraq, we were broke, but he found $30 billion. He said, I declare war on the savings and loan crooks, and I'm going to give everybody back their money. And he's going to find $1 trillion. How come when you said, I declare war on drugs, you didn't find the money for drugs?
Let's talk about the Persian Gulf thing for a minute, because AP came out with a poll the other day and said 70% of Americans feel that we shouldn't have left as early as we did. And we've talked before about the fact that there were some good decisions made and the history is yet to be written. But now we've got this invisible hide-and-seek game going with his nuclear capabilities. From your perspective, as an observer, where do we go next with that?
The president's in a box. So is the country. You know, before the war, I was with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, my position, in that they said you shouldn't go in. And if you do go to war, this is what I said before we went, then you'll kill people, some of your own. You'd better make sure that you defang Saddam Hussein. And you'd better make sure that if you do go to war, you make it worthwhile. God forbid you go to a war and Saddam Hussein remains. And what the American people are saying as they wake up to it is, hey, look, we won the war. That's great. It's nice to do something right, except we didn't finish it. We didn't achieve the objective we should have.
So you're saying we should?
Should what?
Finish it, go back
No,
in.
the American people don't want that. They don't want you to start another war. They'll have a parade for the last one, but the American people don't lust for killing. Let's get that clear.
Can we simply, as a country, expect to be returned to our position of dominance by being the grandest and most powerful military force on the planet?
No, you didn't get to be great that way. The first thing you have to change is a national government attitude that says we don't have to do anything except reduce interest rates and cut the capital gains taxes. If we just make the rich people richer, they'll figure out how to get ahead of the Japanese. Forget about it. Japan is ahead of you because their government has been pumping up industry for years and years and years. All of Europe has been doing that aggressively. Yes, they have free markets, so to speak, but the government takes an active role. Here, the government is saying, no, we'll take care of the rich people, we'll take care of the military, but all the rest of the economy is up to you. Develop your own workforce. Do your own research and development. You figure out how to deal with the trade problems. That won't work. We need a more affirmative, more positive involvement from the federal government. If we get that, we can do anything.
I look at the battle between you and Mel Miller and Marino, and I say, if I'm a New Yorker and I see the three top leaders of the state at odds over this budget wrangle, I almost want them to do it more privately than they did. I almost say, it's like when you see your parents fighting. You know that parents have fights, but couldn't they do it after you go to bed?
Oh, sure, we could have these fights the way Mama and Papa had them. You know, make sure the kids aren't listening because you don't want to scandalize the kids. And that was a very good thing at home. It is not a good thing from politicians in a democracy. If there are going to be differences of opinion, you ought to hear them. Sure, it's upsetting to you.
Assuming it's good business, is it good politics? I mean, saying no is... Saying no a lot. Saying no to a lot of people.
Worst politics in the world. I set a record for popularity when I won. I'm still as smart as I was, which was never brilliant, but whatever level of intelligence I had when I was the most popular victor ever, I still have that. I have even more experience. I'm working even harder. I'm making the same kinds of judgments. Only now the answer is, I'm sorry, using the same mind, the same heart, the same willingness, the same eagerness, the same patriotism, the same everything, I have now concluded I can't give you that extra money for your school. We can't afford it. Boop, down in the polls, 20 points. So is it good politics? No.
Is it a fair hypothesis to say that this process was, in a sad kind of way, necessary, and that the cuts were so big that it needed to go back and forth this many times when people came to terms with the pain?
Why? No, I wouldn't accept that. I didn't need to go back and forth. I delivered my budget. It had all the cuts in it. I took all the abuse. I'm not boasting. But no, it wasn't necessary. You could do what I did. Tell the people the truth and take the heat. Let's be honest.
Someone had already done that, though.
Pardon me?
You'd already done that. Why should they take the heat when you'd already taken it?
Because it was the responsible thing to do, in my opinion. Now, I understand there's a difference of opinion here. But
there's a game of hot potato being played too, and if you're willing to
singe
your hands a little
bit.
No, you kept it. You took it back, I think.
Oh yeah,
with the vetoes.
You want to see the scorch marks in my lap?
In terms of where this leaves the state, just a little bit of a...
Stronger than ever. We'll be the first out of the mess in this country. because our budget was first. We'll be out of it. Connecticut will still be fighting. New Jersey will be having its battle. California is a long way from a solution. We should have been off the stage by now, frankly. This has taken us much longer than I had hoped. But once we're out of the way, we will have done it. We'll have a balanced budget, I guarantee you. You don't think I did all of this only to allow them to unbalance the budget again. So that won't happen. We'll have a balanced budget. We will have had our fight. We will be preserved as a state. We'll be strong as a state because we met the challenge without killing taxes, no devastating cut in services. Yes, education will complain they didn't get enough, but they can toughen up a little bit too, let's be honest. You have superintendents making $160,000 a year, more than the governor. Maybe they're better than the governor, but nobody tells me you have to pay school superintendents $160,000 a year when you're broke.
Governor, I want to talk today about business issues, and specifically the economy. When people look outside, they see green grass, the flowers are popping out of the ground. Are things getting better? Are we optimistic?
Well, for New York State, they are infinitely better than they were a month or so ago because we have a budget, and we have it on time for the first time in 8 years, or at least virtually on time. That solves a lot of problems that we made for ourselves in past years when the legislature wouldn't give us a budget.
What about the defense industry? There's a lot of focus on Long Island, but I know, for example, in Broome County, there's tremendous concern about what's going on with defense and defense diversification. How will that affect the economy of New York?
It is very popular to talk about reducing the defense budget. The defense budget is now $300 billion. Some people talk about cutting it in half. It is probably a good judgment to cut the defense budget even that much, but it will come with a great deal of pain to places like New York that have businesses like Grumman. Let's right now get together, figure out what other kinds of uses there are for your product, figure out what kind of mergers we can make that will get you into commercial. Let's go together over to Europe, over to the East. Let's find markets for your products.
There was a poll done recently that was published by Fleet North Star Bank that talked about business climate in New York. We're just back around to that for a second. And in it, interestingly enough, they said that of the business people that they interviewed, a full 70% said if they been given the choice whether or not to start a business in New York State, they would now choose to start one elsewhere.
I don't believe it.
Why?
I believe they want you to reduce their taxes. The corporate taxes are worse than the other states. We are 19th in the United States if you want to take state taxes. That means there are at least 18 other states with higher state taxes than we, right? That's across the board. And the corporate taxes were even better than 19th.
There seems to be, in this new era of accountability, some sense that business has a different set of accountability standards than perhaps government does. And I wonder if that isn't part of what the country is looking at when they decide that H. Ross Perot in some way or another is. Does it worry you when that you see people attracted to a non-governmental figure as a leader without knowing much about him? How do you feel about that?
I don't believe you're right if you suggest that this country is now attracted to the business moguls. With Perot, it is not that you try this, Steve. Do a poll in your living room, just the next time you have dinner.
Governor, I want to talk today about business issues, and specifically the economy. When people look outside, they see green grass, the flowers are popping out of the ground. And it feels maybe like things are getting better for New York and better for the country. I wanted your sense and your predictions. Are things getting better? Are we optimistic?
Well, for New York State, they are infinitely better than they were a month or so ago because we have a budget, and we have it on time for the first time in 8 years, or at least virtually on time. That solves a lot of problems that we made for ourselves in past years when the legislature wouldn't give us a budget.
What about the defense industry? There's a lot of focus on Long Island, but I know, for example, in Broome County, there's tremendous concern about what's going on with defense and defense diversification. How will that affect the economy of New York?
Only yesterday, I was in Broome County talking exactly about this. It is very popular to talk about reducing the defense budget. The defense budget is now $300 billion. Some people talk about cutting it in half over a period of years. That's $150 billion worth of missiles and airplanes and radar and antennae that you will not be producing. It is probably a good judgment to cut the defense budget even that much, but it will come with a great deal of pain to places like New York that have businesses like Grumman, like Hazeltine, and many, many others, dozens and dozens of subcontractors, scores, that do defense work. What should you do? The federal government has been way behind in providing ways to convert companies that go down as defense contractors into something else. We have been pushing on Washington a program of defense diversification in advance, anticipating. You're a defense contractor, you're now doing antennae. Those antennae are used on our craft that fly. Let's right now get together, figure out what other kinds of uses there are for your product, figure out what kind of mergers we can make that will get you into commercial. Let's go together over to Europe, over to the East. Let's find markets for your products. We have offices there already, the Department of Economic Development of the state of New York. So let's work together.
There was a poll done recently that was published by Fleet North Star Bank that talked about business climate in New York. We're just back around to that for a second. And in it, interestingly enough, they said that of the business people that they interviewed, a full 70% said if they were been given the choice whether or not to start a business in New York State, they would now choose to start one elsewhere.
I don't believe it.
Why?
I believe they want you to reduce their taxes. The corporate taxes are worse than the other states. We are 19th in the United States if you want to take state taxes. That means there are at least 18 other states with higher state taxes than we, right? That's across the board. And the corporate taxes were even better than 19th.
There seems to be, in this new era of accountability, some sense that business has a different set of accountability standards than perhaps government does. And I wonder if that isn't part of what the country is looking at when they decide that H. Ross Perot in some way or another is, where does he come from? He's a businessman and he's done a couple of things, but does it worry you when that you see people attracted to a non-governmental figure as a leader without knowing much about him? How do you feel about that?
I don't believe you're right if you suggest that this country is now attracted to the business moguls. With Perot, it is not that, you try this, Steve, do a poll in your living room, just the next time you have dinner. How did Perot make his money? They don't really know. What it is about Perot is not just that he's a businessman. They know he's a successful businessman, but he's much more. He is the ultimate in common sense. He appears to be very, very strong, very quick, very smart, very plain. He is the antithesis of your politician in many ways. Your politician is not effective, is not successful, doesn't talk straight. This guy is successful, whatever he does, he's effective and he talks straight. That's what they think.
And he's a non-candidate.
And the final thing is he's Mr. Nota. Mr. Nota is the most popular guy alive now. Yeah. None of the above. And he is the ultimate outsider, plus he has $100 million.
We talked earlier about the fact that New York is, in a sense, held hostage by what goes on at the federal level. But now it seems like we're going to have to fend for ourselves. You think New York is the plan that will...
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a fiscal remaking of New York, timely budget, more structural reform than they've given me. We have a lot more to do, but we're off to a good start. A physical remaking of New York, $50 billion we've done the last 9 years since I've been governor. Now we're going to increase the pace of investment, and that's very important. So it's all together a rebuilding of the state for a grand new future, and I feel very optimistic about it. And I'll be around to help work on it.
Let's begin by talking about the senatorial election this past week. Are you surprised that Liz Holtzman did as poorly as she did?
Geraldine lost, it appears. Abrams, Bobby won. Holtzman got killed. She ran behind Sharpton. She had millions of dollars, credentials, a former congressperson, a current controller, women, all the right issues. Sharpton had nothing but a bad reputation, no money, all enemies, papers mocking him. And he ran ahead of Holtzman. What that tells you is that people were disgusted by the negatives.
Just before the election, I saw on TV, there was a series of political commercials that came on and said, Liz Holtzman's a fighter, and Bob Abrams is a fighter, and Geraldine Ferraro is a fighter. What are all these people doing? Who are they fighting?
Yeah, so are alley cats. fighter. And that's also a kind of puerile notion that to be tough, you've got to be punching people in the nose. To be tough, you have to tell the truth when it's unpopular. To be tough, you have to be able to sit down when you're a student and face a really hard problem that drives you crazy. And when you're a politician, to be tough means dealing with budget deficits and going to the people and telling them the truth, which is, hey, look, we're going to have to either raise your taxes or cut the goodies we give you, but you can't have all good things in this life. That's tough. Politicians don't want to do that. That's why Perot's not running.
You liked Ross Perot. You liked the economic plan that he had for this country. Is Bill Clinton's economic plan tough enough?
Well, let's be fair now to Governor Clinton. And this is a subject I know very well because I had long talks with him before I agreed to nominate him. If you look closely at his plan, he has put in all the ingredients you need. He has said, you must raise the taxes. I will only raise them on the wealthy. I will cut them, as a matter of fact, on the middle class. But you do have to raise taxes on the wealthy. He has said you're going to have to control entitlements. Now, he only did a little bit of entitlement control with Medicare, but he did some, so that he made the point you're going to have to do entitlements. He also said the obvious, which is we're going to have to cut defense. And then he said we're going to have to cut to create wealth that we need to invest in people, in education, in roads and bridges, in skills training, etc. So he has said all the right things. You could argue, well, Mario, he hasn't given us enough magnitude. Well, maybe so, but at least he has told you all the elements you need. What he said is, look, prepare yourself. You're going to have to raise some revenues. You're going to have to cut some things you give.
But hasn't he pulled those punches a little bit?
He threw it. President Bush is not throwing it. President Bush is telling you just the opposite. President Bush, if you can believe it, after 12 years of disaster, after a $4 trillion debt, $350 billion a year deficit, said, don't worry about a thing. I'm going to cut your taxes. I'm going to cut all the spending magically. I won't tell you how, but I'm going to do it. Trust me.
When I watched the Republican National Convention, the only name that I heard more than Mario Cuomo was Woody Allen. What kind of emblem are they trying to make of the name Mario Cuomo?
I don't know. They've stopped, you notice. What happened is my polls went up. They've gone up dramatically. So I'm hoping they don't stop. Some of it was absolutely stupid. For example, President Bush, he said one day, I think he said something like this, well, Governor Cuomo, go to Baskin Robbins and he wouldn't be able to decide on chocolate or vanilla. So, I mean, it was so inane for a president of the United States on national television, making his big speech, and somebody came to me and said, what do you think of that? I was really at a loss. So well, maybe he's a pistachio guy. He likes nuts. What can I tell you?
But they also did Mario Cuomo on the Supreme Court.
Ah, not bad.
That would be the ultimate disaster.
They were so stupid on that, too. I hate to use a word like that. I really do, but I can't think of a better one. The vice president says, Supreme Court, you see, you put Cuomo on, that's the end of the death penalty. Is he a lawyer, Quayle? Because if he is, they ought to tear up his diploma. I mean, I don't mind the National Guard, but I want to check the law school this guy went to. Because, the fact that you are against the death penalty as a governor or a legislator has nothing to do with what you would do as a judge. The Judge Berger, I think it was, Warren Berger, said as a judge, when it comes to the death penalty, I believe it's constitutional. Although, if I were voting on it in the legislature, I would vote against it. There are two different questions. Do you think you should have it, and do you think it is constitutional? Now, either the vice president, God bless him, didn't know that, in which case he is shockingly ignorant for a lawyer, if he is a lawyer, or he did know it, and he was lying to people.
Maybe this is cheating, but I thought we'd start with baseball. It's August. Baseball is in the news. The Yankees are doing well. The Mets even seem to be shaping up a little bit. Now we've got this baseball strike.
Well, fiscally, if it happens, it's very bad for everybody. Bad for the players, bad for the league, no matter what happens. bad for the United States of America. Bad spiritually. It's bad from a values point of view. Because a lot of Americans don't understand how you can be as rich as they all are.
Let's talk about Mario Cuomo, the baseball player, for a second. Was there ever a time when you looked at baseball as a way to make a lot of money?
No, as a matter of fact, when I signed a contract with Pittsburgh, I got $2,000. Mickey Mantle had gotten $1,100 the year before. Yogi Berra got $500. But I was so convinced that I wouldn't be a good baseball player and that baseball wasn't for me that I almost didn't even show up.
Do you like George Steinbrenner?
See, I'm at a different stage in my life. You know, when I was younger, I was very harsh in my judgments about everybody. People write casually, he's a good man, he's a bad man, he's a greedy man. I don't know anything like that about him. He's a businessman who owns the most valuable sports franchise in the world, perhaps. And he wants it to return profits to all the shareholders, not just him, because it's such a valuable property. He is disturbed that other teams in the league and in baseball generally draw more than he does. He doesn't know why that should be. He's been in first place all year long. He has the Yankee Stadium. It's the most valuable franchise in baseball, and he can't get people to come to the games in the numbers that would appear to be appropriate. He's trying to change that. I don't have any difficulty with that.
Elections end up often being focused on one or two issues. Death penalty, abortion, they're hot-button issues. Sometimes they're not the ones you'd like. If you could set the agenda today, if you could make a #1 issue, say, look, this is what we should focus on, and I don't want to focus on emotional issues, what would it be? #1 issue.
The #1 issue would be intelligent, don't focus on one issue. That's what I would try to achieve. If I could get one thing done, I would say to the people, don't let them con you. Don't let them think that you can do any one thing and solve the crime problem. You can't afford the foolishness of saying, this is the single most important thing. Now, smaller minds will insist on that. The media will insist on that because it irritates them to say, oh no, you have to keep 50 balls in the air at once. They only get 800 words to write. And so they'll write things like, well, this guy, you know, he refuses to reduce things to simplistics. That's right. And if I get another 4 years, I'll refuse to reduce things to simplistics for 4 more years.
You've said that there is a chance that you might lose.
Oh, there's always a chance you might lose.
Does that mean that Pataki is a candidate of substance?
No.
Is he not?
I don't know. I haven't heard him, you know, enough to know whether he's going to have any real positions.
Let's talk about your first set of campaign commercials. A lot of people talking about them, and the one thing that I've heard from a couple different people who are smart and who I respect is the theme is obviously, look what we've done. We've done this, we've done... No, that's not the theme.
No, go ahead.
We've accomplished these things. And the one read that I wonder about is, it's almost as if you feel like people don't give you credit for what you've accomplished, and you have to remind them of those things. But do you think that television commercials saying, these are the things you don't know, are going to fundamentally change people's misperceptions, and let's say for a minute they are, about the accomplishments or lack of accomplishments of the administration? Then why do it?
No. Well, it's not my idea. You know, I approve of it, but people smarter than I do it. What I would expect, and I think I would know how to do it myself if I were a television person, I would try, I'll give you a commercial, okay? I'll make one up now. A man and a woman sitting on a sofa watching television. And the woman says to the man, can you name a single thing that the governor has done? He's been there 12 years. They said he should have been president, et cetera. They should have run. They want to put him on the Supreme Court. Can you name one thing? And the guy turns to her and says, no, I can't name one thing, but I'll name 100. He reduced the taxes to the lowest level in 30 years. The Cato Institute, a conservative think tank, said he was the champion tax cutter. He created 13 centers of advanced technology, made the roads and bridges safer than they've ever been, did the first environmental assistance fund, did the first woman on the Court of Appeals, the first Latino on the court, did it, and then the woman, you know, and there's a crawl now on the screen listing these things, and he's going a mile an hour, he's going so fast, she gets aggravated, puts her hand over his mouth, he pulls the hand away right at the end of the commercial, second 27, and says, and he did more. Boom, end of commercial. If you want to know what the governor did, just write or call this number and listen to the whole list on top.
When you wake up in the morning, what are the things you look forward to in a day?
Going to sleep. Yeah, I'm so tired now because we're running all over the place, you know. You get up very, very early. really early, because I want to do that work before I get out of the house at whatever time it is, 8, 9, 10. But you are tired.
What do you like as a boss? What's your management style? Demanding, easygoing, challenging, relentless?
Yeah, all of those.
I've heard on more than one occasion from people that have worked in the administration that you're the hardest working person they've ever known, and most demanding.
Well, I don't know about, I am what they would call hardworking. I'm working all the time. I have difficulty with the word hard, because it really isn't that hard for me. This is what I do. I wrote a line once, life is motion, not joy. I don't like to sleep long hours. The idea of going down to the beach and smearing cream on your lips and your nose, you know, and then go, for 3 hours? Be dead for 3 hours and let them parch your throat and burn your skin? That to me is foolish. And now, a lot of people do it, and don't get me wrong, I don't want to ruin tourism. But, you know, I'd rather stay busy. So it's not, you know, that's what I do.
I was told that your idea of a summer vacation is coming into the office for a week without a tie.
No, that's a summer and fall. The whole week is a very long period of time.
The last time when you announced you were going to run, you said that you wanted to finish the job.
Few more years is all I need, I think. The 3 years you took from me in the recession.
Does that mean that this is your final term if you win?
Well, I hope that I'll be able to get it all done over the next few years. I think I will be able to get it all done. We're pointed in the right direction now because I put everything in place. There are tax cuts. There will be more. There is high tech. We are making things of quality and selling it overseas. I have strengthened my education system, but there's obviously a little more to do. I think if you give me back the 3 years I had, I'll probably not need any more. So yeah, I am hoping and I expect that I'll get it all done in this term.
Let's look back 3 terms for a second. Do you remember your agenda? I'm sure you do. Your agenda as you began your first term as governor of the state.
Very well. Nobody else does, but I do. I remember my campaign. It was jobs and justice. And the truth is, if you look at the state of the state for this year, it was basically jobs and justice. And the reason is there were similar times, pretty much. In 1982, when I was running, we were in the midst of the Reagan recession. Things were down. 1983, my first year as governor, we had the largest potential deficit in our history up until then. And so what I said is you have to encourage business with tax cuts, and we have to fight crime because that was the beginning of crack. That was the beginning of the drug madness. And I said jobs and justice. Now we have the Bush recession. It's not fair to say it's Bush's or Reagan's, but that's what they were called. The Bush recession, which was the whole subject of the 1992 election. And so there was a similar approach in both cases. We had the recession in '82. We fought back. By the time '87 got here, I was the most popular governor in New York State history because we had come back from the recession and we're doing great. We're going to do the same thing after this recession, but we're a few years away.
When you were looking at this job with no experience,
right,
with a fresh pair of eyes, how do you compare what you've been able to achieve in that first year with what you thought you could achieve when you began the job?
Well, see, when I became governor, I knew a lot because I had been lieutenant governor for 4 years, and I had been Secretary of State for 4 years, so I knew the state, and I knew pretty much what to expect. And I was very realistic about my expectations. I made one judgment that is critical in terms of how the administration will be perceived when I'm all through. If you want to be remembered for something in this business, because people have a bumper sticker mentality, what you have to do is pick one thing and say it over and over. I'm the education governor, the education governor, the education governor. I'm the environment governor, the environment governor, the environment governor. I win wars, I win wars, I win wars. I decided that was no way to govern this complicated state, that I would do whatever I had to do, and that meant everything. I haven't left anything out. And we have had extraordinary accomplishments in every area. There's not an area you can mention where I can't point to something unusual, unique, maybe even historic, not environment, not taxes, the lowest taxes in 30 years, not infrastructure, the biggest rebuilding program in the history of the state, not environment, the first environmental assistance fund, not safety on the roads, the safest roads 5 years in a row, not innovation, the first seatbelt law, the first acid rain law, the first ethics law. There is nothing you can mention. The court system. I appointed 11 judges to the Court of Appeals. I appointed the entire Court of Appeals. That's never before happened in history. I appointed the first 2 women, the first Latino, the first 2 blacks. It's now, even after the tragedy of losing a chief judge in a most unfortunate way, it's now regarded as a superb court, maybe the best in the country. So the general public doesn't know any of that. But I haven't been surprised in what we were able to do as compared to what I thought we were able to do. We did an awful lot, and that's what I expected, and that's what we've done. When I ran in 1982, you couldn't find 3 promises in what I said. Not 3 promises.
No promises.
I made a promise not to raise the taxes. I made a promise to try to put the first woman on the Court of Appeals. Some Republican found a press release issued in 1982 by my campaign office in late October that says, the governor says that if he does anything, it will be to reduce the rates of crime. And they said, see, he made a promise to reduce the rates of crime in 82.
You said, no, I didn't do anything.
I mean, beside the fact that that was ridiculous and shows you, how hard up for arguments you can get when you think you're in an effort where you might lose. If you wanted to play it semantically, you'd have to read the language this way. Well, I said, even if they were my words, which they weren't, they were a press release in the middle of a campaign by the press office, but even if they were my words, say, if I do anything, it will be to reduce the rate. Not, I will reduce crime. It will be something to reduce. And I did plenty of things to reduce the rates of crime. And the rates of crime did go down. So, aside from those semantic quibbles, I didn't make a lot of promises. Other than I'm going to work very hard and do everything I can.
But you make them to yourself.
No, I make one promise to myself, that I'll quit when I don't believe it anymore. And before I quit or they beat me, I will work with every ounce of energy I have. Because if you can't give this job everything, then you ought to leave this job. This job requires that you give it everything you have. And I've been able to do that. I still can, even now after 11 years. I have more energy than most people, more strength, more good health than most people. And that's not something I'm accountable for. It's a gift. I have good health and good strength. I use it all up in this business. And that I promised myself. You've got to be able to do that. It's like a marriage. If you can't give it everything, you have to get out.
I keep coming back to the word, and you've used it before, this whole idea of service. And it seems to me that's almost your litmus test, is how can I be of service?
Well, that's,
explain service.
It wasn't always. I mean, people have different objectives at different stages in their lives, I think. I started very young. Matilda and I met very young. We were married while we were still in school. I had only one objective then. It was not public service. It was to take care of my family. We didn't have any money. We had a mattress in a furnished apartment. That's what we owned. I had 2 kids before I had a job. I was still in school. I had plenty of jobs, but until I was a professional, I had 2 kids already. Lived in a furnished apartment. I had one objective: take care of Matilda and the kids. Get out there and make enough money so that eventually they can get into a house, which we did a little Cape Cod. That's all I cared about. Work, 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 bring the money home, take care of the kids. And I did that reasonably well. After a while, as the kids grew up and we knew some success, we turned to public service as a volunteer. I represented people against Rockefeller, against Lindsay, against the United States of America, free. One group for 7 years, another group for 3 years, no fee. That was a form of public service. I could afford to do it because I was a practicing lawyer and having some success. And then eventually, Matilda and I and the family decided, let's go into public service. And now that's all there is public service. It's the most important thing to us. Otherwise, I could have gotten out in 1990 when the trouble was really starting, after 2 successful years, record-breaking victories, 2 successful terms. My people said, let's get out, get a lot of money, you know, live like a lord, go to a Wall Street firm or do something else, write books, give speeches, make money. Ed Koch now tells me he's making $1.5 million a year or $1 million a year. But I think he misses the public service, and I think I would too.
Is your sense that the 4 years ahead are in some way easier than the 4 years we've just come through, economically?
The 4 years ahead will be easier than the last 3 years we've come, absolutely. They won't be as easy as 8 years ago, but they will be easier than the last 3 years. There will be gradual growth in the economy, not to the halcyon days you knew in 85, 86, 87, 88, but there will be gradual growth in the economy, and that's what gives you the relative ease.
When you look back on the last 3 terms, there must be disappointments, personal, professional, things you wanted to achieve, things that you came close to achieve. What are they?
Well, I didn't get the bias-related violence bill. You know, that's a law that says, hey, look, if you beat somebody up because he's a Jew, or she's an Italian, or she's a lesbian, or he's a gay or a black or a white, that's ridiculous. That's absurd, and that's dangerous to this democracy in a particular way. This democracy depends upon keeping diversity intact. When you start challenging diversity, when you say to be different is to be inferior, then you're challenging the main predicate of this democracy. We should have passed a law that says if you hurt somebody because she's an Asian, then you're going to pay a special price. Our legislature, our Senate would not do that. They're basically Republican, but they would not do it because they didn't want to give gays and lesbians that protection. That is wrong, and that's a big disappointment. Because, let's face it, the Senate and I and the Assembly, the Democrats in the Assembly, the Republicans in the Senate, agree about 900 times a year, and we do bills, about 900 bills a year. So there's not I'm not saying that I condemn them for all things, but this is a big disappointment. I gave up on funding my own good idea called Liberty Scholarships because we're in the middle of a recession. I regret that. I didn't travel enough in the earlier years. I should have gone more to Japan and Israel and France. I was being invited by countries all over the world, but you know, I thought it was better to stay at the desk and work here, and I saw everything as a boondoggle. That was very naive and unfortunate. I should have been out there doing business, you know, getting business. We did a lot of it in the last few years, but I should have done it sooner. Probably I should have been more active in the National Governors Association. You know, most of the governors are very unhappy that I haven't been active. I just didn't like going away for 3 days, 4 days at a time to a National Governors Association conference because I'm not built that way. That was a mistake. I should have gone. I should have spent more time with them, I think. So those are 4 regrets.
Someone told me you've only lived 2 places in your life. Is that true? Albany and Queens?
You mean my residence?
Yes.
Oh, well, I was born in South Jamaica, 9536 150th Street, and I live...
Went to St. John's.
I live now at 18817 Rio Drive. That's 188 to 150. That's 38 blocks. So go 9 blocks north, and that's really my mother's house, and we're looking for another house, but it'll be in Queens. Yeah, I'm born and raised in Queens. I've been all over the world, but I was born and raised in Queens, and I love it. And, you know, I stay there, and I'll probably die there, because I like the continuity of it. I like being reminded. The roots are significant to me. You know, the stretch is important to me, what you were, where you came from. I don't want to go to a place that's altogether different. Why should I? I want to remember my mother and father. I want to remember the shoes with the newspaper in them. I want to remember the junkyard and the war and collecting silver foil. I want to remember sitting on a milk box in my father's grocery store when milk came in crates and you covered it with ice so it wouldn't spoil, and it wasn't homogenized, so all the cream was at the top of the bottle, and listening to Joe DiMaggio with my ear to a little brown radio that was on the shelf because my father thought it was embarrassment for a baseball game to be playing in his ethnic grocery store. I want to remember all of that. It's important to me.
Let's talk about crime. I mean, the rumble out there is
that's going to be, for everyone, the election year issue. And that it's what's top on voters' minds, and it's got to be addressed, and guns maybe even as the first issue on the subset. You and Giuliani seem to be prepared to join forces on that issue. How will that work?
This is going to sound awful. I think most reasonable people agree more or less on what has to be done about guns and crime. Rudy Giuliani is a reasonable person, so am I. There are nuances of difference, but the basic propositions are all the same. And here's what they are in a nutshell. One, the crime is always going to be with us, but it is at a grotesque level now. It's worse than it usually is. It seems to come in waves, and this wave is a terrible one. Two, government's first obligation is to keep you safe. If government can't do that, it can't do anything. So it's no surprise that everybody, all the politicians and all the people in government are talking about crime. They should. That is the first concern, to keep people safe. Number three, the syndrome is really drugs, guns, violence. It's all one piece. You can't separate them. The violence is not separated from the guns. The guns is not separated from the drugs. So you have to deal with all three.
Why is it poverty, drugs, guns, violence?
I didn't say poverty, drugs,
No,
guns.
I did.
Well, I think there is a relationship, and I'll get to that. But I want to talk specifically about poverty and what the relationship is and what it is not. So the syndrome is complicated. The solution must be complicated. That means this foolish argument, I call it in the State of the State, between those who say, let's emphasize law enforcement, that's the whole game, and others at the opposite extreme who say, no, it's all a matter of root causes. If you had more social, that's a foolish argument. The truth is, you need some tougher laws. You need better enforcement. You need drug treatment and drug education. So you need laws, law enforcement, drug education, plus you must deal with the underlying social problems, or you will have more crime. There's no question. So you must do it all. You can't pick one side that you prefer because you think 51% of the people like that side and say, we'll do it all with a death penalty, or we'll do it all with a housing program. Those are false polar extremes. You need tough laws, real enforcement. You need drug education. You need to stop people from taking drugs one way or another. And you need social programs in the sense that you give people the chance to work, a future, a hope, so that they're not misled into a life of crime. You have to do it all. Politicians don't want to admit you have to do it all because it's so expensive, it's so complicated, it's so difficult, so hard to communicate. But all reasonable people will agree on what I just said.
And yet I know that viewers who are sitting and watching this, while they agree with the idea of solving these problems, also have this sense in the pit of their stomach that we've been on this slide, that problems have been growing, they've been growing for a period of time, and that there isn't anything that's going to be done that's going to fundamentally change the direction we seem to be moving in. And that's terrifying.
Well, for those people, let's say two things. First of all, you're right, it's very bad, and here's what we ought to do. I said it earlier in this discussion with you. 3 strikes and you're in. Put these people who are incorrigible, violent felons away, life imprisonment without parole. Take the assault weapons away. Don't give as much parole as you're giving now. Be sure the system is effective. Be sure that a potential criminal knows there's a good chance he's going to get caught, convicted, and canned. All of that will help. I will also say this to you, that the truth is, and I know this is hard to accept, that for all the Colin Fergusons that you have occurring now, the crime rates, believe it or not, are down. That's no comfort. I understand that. And I'm not saying we shouldn't respond actively. But from an historic point of view, the rates are down. The panic and the urgency you hear now, you heard at the time of Berkowitz in 1977 when I was running against Koch. You hear it periodically. Let me give you this. I think it's 1838. I think it's 1838. Lincoln is 29 years old, and he gives a speech to the Lyceum, and he says, the riotous conditions in this country threaten us with chaos. We must make the enforcement of the law the political religion of the nation. That's Lincoln.
It seems to me that one of the fundamental changes that we're faced with today is that the jobs that are available for young men and women seem, in so many ways, hopeless, retail, short, without a career curve.
Let's take that. Let's take that.
Not working
Let's
with your
stop
hands.
that. I think there are differences. This is not one of them. That's a lot of garbage. You know, in those days, my father was a ditch digger. There are people today who would say, I can't start with anything menial. I won't get to the top. He started with something menial. He raised a family, became a small businessman, did very well, thank you. I was a stock clerk. I was a laborer with a construction group. I worked in a department store. Believe it or not, don't tell anybody, I hope they don't see this film. I learned about ladies' lingerie from a woman who taught me cup sizes because I did inventory with brassieres in Gert's department store because that was a job, okay? There were, in the old days, there were menial jobs that you took because you needed a job. There are plenty of menial jobs that people could take now. The difference, they don't want to. Why? Values have changed dramatically. Television has had something to do with that. Electronic communication has had something to do with that. Affluence has had something to do with that. Mobility has had something to do with that. Social programs have had something to do with that. We did make life easier in many, many different ways. And then we got it all confused by making it harder than it's ever been by inventing crack, which is the big negative difference between this time and all previous times. There was no crack. There was no drug that addicts 1 out of 2 people when they try it for the first time, and that makes you crazy the way crack does.
I want to get to crack because I think it's interesting. I don't want to talk further about it. But let's finish the job thing because I think that there's something maybe that we missed in all that. The woman that taught you how to be a stock clerk knew that you were not going to be a stock clerk for the rest of your life.
How did she know that?
You knew it.
I did not know it. I was a kid from South Jamaica. Nobody went to college in my family. Nobody went to college on the block. We had a block party for Anthony Boscano when he made the Department of Sanitation, because that was a civil service job. He was going to have a uniform. He was going to have a pension. He was going to have respect. We had a block party. People celebrated. Tony got a job with the civil service with the city of New York. If you could have become a cop, you would have been king of that community. We didn't know anything. We knew that you're supposed to take a job, you're supposed to work, you're supposed to do the right thing. Then if you get lucky, you get lucky. I got very, very lucky. That's all it was. But no, this notion that you knew someday you would be a governor.
No. Don't misunderstand me. I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, but then say it again.
It seems to me now that there's a disillusionment in the fact that there isn't any chance, that there is this dead end, and that the job at McDonald's behind the counter will lead to the job at McDonald's behind the counter. Now maybe that's not true.
It is not true.
But people don't believe that. Kids don't believe that.
Well, I'm not so sure of that. There were people when I was growing up who felt that they wouldn't be stock boys, and they certainly wouldn't be ditch diggers like Andrea. And some of them became bookmakers, and some of them became criminals, because that life was too hard for them. A ditch digger like Andrea, forget about it. I'm going to work for Tony, the bookmaker. And they became bookmakers. And they wound up in jail. And they wound up being shot, or they wound up being killed, or they wound up getting in trouble. That's always been true. There have always been people, two paths cross in the woods, Robert Frost, and you have to choose which one you'll travel. That choice was available to us, and that choice is available to people now. The big complication in this time is drugs. The big difference in this time is crack. We didn't have anything like it. The worst you had in our community was marijuana. There was heroin in the world, but the poor people, because there was more poverty then than there is now, there was less wealth available. You couldn't buy heroin. It was just not real in our neighborhood. Marijuana was real. Reefers were real. Reefers are bad. I don't like reefers for kids especially, but reefers don't do to you what crack does to you.
I want to get to 3 or 4 important New York things, and I know that we're going to run out of time.
Here we go, short answers.
Yankees.
Stay.
What do we do to keep
new
them?
stadium.
How?
new stadium, fix up the Bronx, clean up the Bronx, they're going to stay.
In the Bronx or in Manhattan?
In Yankee Stadium, exactly where they are now. Clean up the place, fix up the stadium, new luxury boxes, new Metro North, maybe even a roof on the place. Abe Hirschfeld has a very good plan.
Giuliani. He's going to come to Albany, he's going to say, Governor, we need money for the city. What are you going to say?
You're right. Who's been the champion for the city for all these years? I'm glad to have you. Go talk to your Republican friends. They're the ones who say no.
Clinton. It's been in a year. There was a sense that it would do well for New York to have a Democrat in the White House, that he would bring home the bacon in some way or another. You endorsed him. Has he done that for us?
Not yet, but it's not his fault, I don't think. I mean, you know, the budget has been very, very difficult. And I think he's trying, and I think there's a long way to go, and I'm sure he'll give us fairness in the long run. The biggest test is Medicaid now. We get 50.7% from the federal government for Medicaid. Other places get 82%. We're demanding, Senator Pat Moynihan and I are leading the charge, we're demanding more fairness. The president says he's going to take a look at that and see if he can give us a better formula. That will be a real big test of whether the president's able to help this state, and I think he will.
Gambling. NYRA, OTB, Lotto, states in gambling, and there seems to be problems with NYRA, there's problems with OTB. It's been an issue for you for a while. What are you going to do?
NYRA should buy OTB, should merge with OTB, make it one group, because NYRA has the product, the horse races. OTB is merchandising it. You know, put the merchandiser and the marketer in with the product maker, make it one company, NYRA. NYRA should buy OTB. They're working on that now, should absorb it, make it one unit. Privatize OTB.
You've talked about 3 strikes you're in.
Yes, sir.
Do we have the cells to do that? Are we going to build?
You have to provide them. I have built more cells than any governor in history.
And we're going to build some more?
Well, hey, if I've built more than any governor in history, I've proved I can do it when you have to do it, right?
This is a bit of a cynical question, but it's one that I know viewers think sometimes. You know, whether it's Joe in the Bronx or Ann who's in Schenectady, they sit and they watch and they say, will it really make a difference to me who has this office 4 years from now? Will it personally change the world around me in the short term?
All I can tell you is since I've been governor, the taxes have gone down, the education's gotten stronger. We built 13 centers for advanced technology. We brought the state back from a recession of 1983 to a high point of its history, and we're doing the same now with the recession of '89. It doesn't show yet, but it will 3 or 4 years from now, especially if I stick around. Can I say to people it'll make a difference? They have to make that judgment. I would think it makes a difference who your leaders are. If you get the wrong leader for a $60 billion state, the 10th largest economy in the world, one of the most complicated places in the world to govern and to lead, make the wrong judgment, maybe that can hurt you. If I'm the wrong leader, I can surely hurt you. No question about that. But I think the one thing that people have to know is you have to take this seriously. This is not a grocery store like Andrew Cuomo's little grocery store. It's not a mama and papa store. It's not a simple operation. It is the most complicated state in the Union, with the exception, I think, of California. It is the 10th largest economy in the world. You really do have to know what you're doing to do it.
Final question. The tone of this entire conversation has been extraordinarily pragmatic, and as you said, that's also part of the tone of the state of the state.
I'm a New Yorker.
But you're also, and I've seen you to be from time to time, a great dreamer. Close your eyes and see things ahead and aim for them. When you close your eyes, what are some of the dreams that you're setting out ahead of yourself?
For the place, really, not for me. I've had more dreams than I'm entitled to. I've had the dreams fulfilled that I wasn't entitled to dream. For the place, drugs gone, peace, a generation of people who are not racist, who are not stupid about difference, who understand difference and appreciate it. A place where everybody has telecommunications capacity, where everybody can learn everything, even if they're in a wheelchair, because it comes on your screen, and because you can afford it even if you're broke. The government sees to that. A place where everybody can work at a job that's worthwhile and that will give them dignity and even fulfillment. Place where the air is clean, and most of all, a place where there's peace and ideas and discussion and a place that protects itself from a great new threat, and that is isolation. Because now you can live all by yourself. You never have to leave your bedroom, even to work. Get interactive television. You can have a conference with anybody, a fax machine, a telephone. You never have to leave. Get a video cassette. You never have to go rub shoulders with the guy at the Loews Valencia. You never have to see anybody. You can hide the rest of your life and live like a monk. That would be awful.
It is the cutting-edge danger of this new
technology. That would be awful. You got to go back into the streets, back into the parks. Get out there. Argue with your neighbor. Go next. Tell him he's making too much noise. Get to know him.
Thank you.
Okay. The temptation is to say it again the way you said it the last time because you said it so well, and then you stop being inventive. All right, here we go. How am I going to work with this tie? Look at the tie you wore. My God.
Start with the blind.
My son-in-law makes ties. Well, Ken Cole, he makes ties now, makes shoes and ties. That's terrible.
Terrible tie.
It is.
I brought my favorite tie. It goes with my suspenders.
I hate to see his shorts if that's a good tie he wears.
All set?
Yes.
I pushed somebody right into the pool at the mansion that way.
Did the camera go?
Oh, that's not fair. Come on. Whoa. Okay?
Yep. For promise. I'm sorry, wait, let me point that out.
Can I tell you something? The whole fucking plate was loose. It was loose. The governor, wobbly.
Oh no. That sounds like a good promo.